Every single organization, from a tiny startup scrambling in a garage to a massive global corporation, faces the exact same fundamental challenge. How in the world do you get everyone to pull in the same direction? No, really, just think about that for a second. How do you get thousands of individual people, all with their own ideas, their own ambitions, their own way of doing things, to line up their everyday actions with the company's big picture strategy? It's a massive, massive puzzle. Way back in 1982, a researcher named Kenneth Merchant really hit the nail on the head. He said, at its heart, management control is simply about making sure people do what needs to be done. It sounds so simple, right? But as we're about to find out, it is anything but. And this, right here, is what the experts call the fundamental management control problem. It's a question that has kept leaders up at night for decades. Essentially, once you've come up with a brilliant plan, how do you make sure it actually happens? How do you close that gap between the strategy that's written down on a PowerPoint slide and the thousands of tiny actions your team takes every single day? So, how did we first try to crack this nut? Well, the early answers were pretty logical, pretty straightforward. They focused on what you could easily see and enforce: numbers and rules. Our whole understanding of control has evolved so dramatically. You can see the journey right here. It really kicks off in the 60s with this pure focus on metrics. But then, by the 70s, we started to realize, there's this messy human element we have to account for. And that realization eventually led us to the much more complete, holistic view we have today. So the first instinct was super simple: measure everything, just manage by the numbers. And hey, if that turned out to be too difficult, well, the next idea was to just avoid the problem altogether. Use a robot, centralize the decision so only one person has to make it, or just outsource the risky part. Basically, try to engineer the messy human problem right out of the equation. But yeah, there's always a but, isn't there? A massive complication blew that whole idea up. It turns out you can't just engineer people out of a system that's run by people. The human factor changed everything. And this is where the story gets really, really interesting. Anthony Hopwood pointed out something that probably felt wild at the time. He said that problems don't just pop up when people resist the controls. Sometimes the absolute biggest issues happen when they follow them too closely. And this illustrates his point perfectly. So imagine this. Management sets a strict target to slash the number of product defects. It's a good goal, right? Of course. But what happens on the ground? Employees who are now laser-focused on hitting that one specific number might start hiding defects, or maybe they reclassify them as something else. The number on the report looks amazing, but the actual quality of the product is getting worse. A total backfire. This huge realization that simple, well-intentioned rules can go completely sideways pushed everyone to develop a much more sophisticated approach: the modern idea of a control package. So, fast forward to 2008, researchers Malmi and Brown finally gave this idea a formal name. They argued that you absolutely cannot think of controls as individual, separate levers that you pull. Nope. Instead, they are a package, a whole set of interconnected systems that all bump into and influence each other. So the critical point here is this. If you only look at one piece of the puzzle, say just the bonus system or just one performance metric, you are getting a dangerously incomplete picture. It's kind of like trying to understand how an engine works by only looking at a single spark plug. You're going to miss the whole story. So what's actually in this package? Well, Malmi and Brown identified 5 key elements that all have to work together. You've got culture, planning, what they call cybernetic controls, just think of those as your classic metrics and feedback loops, plus of course rewards and the administrative rules. Let's just unpack this real quick. Cultural controls, that's about the shared values, the beliefs, the way we do things around here. Planning is pretty straightforward. It's about setting clear goals. Cybernetic controls are the measurement systems that give you feedback. Rewards, well, that's what gets people motivated. And finally, administrative controls provide the basic structure, the org chart, the policies that holds the whole thing together. Okay, so we've taken this little journey from simple numbers to these complex, interconnected packages. But why does all this academic history actually matter to anyone working in a real organization today? If you remember just one single thing from all of this, please make it this: the results can and they will surprise you. Because these systems involved human beings, they are never, ever perfectly predictable. The system you design is not always the system you get. So what should you really take away from this?
First, designing these systems has to be a deliberate, systematic process. Second, they are never done. You constantly have to be tweaking and evolving them. Third, never, ever underestimate the human element. It's the most powerful and, by far, the most unpredictable factor in the whole equation. And finally, focusing on just one thing, whether it's metrics or culture or whatever, is a recipe for failure. You absolutely need the whole package.
And all that leaves us with a pretty fascinating question for the future. I mean, with powerful new tech like AI, with the rise of remote work, and just with constant disruptive change, this fundamental problem isn't going away. So it really makes you wonder, right? What will the control package of tomorrow even need to include?